My name is Scott Nihill. I met you in the previous panel, and so today we're going to be showing off a short animation and a game, which is part of our project Widddle. So I'll just give you a little bit of background and context, and then just let the work speak for itself. Can we get the maybe the screen on the TVs? So tomorrow officially, though it is live now, we're launching the prototype for Widddle.CA. So this is something that we've been creating in partnership with CAMH and a number of other partners. And I also just wanted to introduce you to Allison, my co-producer at Embreate, Larissa, who's just taking some photos over there. She's with Play Factory, and she's one of the co-producers of the project. And Lelaine, our lead developer. So Widddle, at the heart of it, it's stories about depression. It started, and right now the focus is centered around comedians telling us stories about their personal experience with depression. And then what we've done is we've turned them into a short animation as well as a casual, quick-to-play mobile game. So maybe to start, we'll play the video. So this video is based on one of the stories that we received from Brian, and I'll just let the video speak for itself. There should be audio. Or not speak for itself. If it comes to it, I'll try to retell the story.
I've been suffering from depression for years. A few years ago, I went through a particularly rough patch where everything felt difficult and overwhelming. If I was able to pull myself out of bed, I'd go through the day like I was a zombie. It felt like a part of me was bullying me, taking every opportunity to sabotage my life. If I did make it out of bed, I wasn't present to my surroundings at all. It felt like my head was 1,000 miles from my body. Even ordering a coffee in the morning became an insurmountable challenge. Waves of anxiety would wash over me as I stared at all the options on the menu. I'd be so worried about the people waiting behind me that I'd order something else I didn't even want. I was so wrapped up in my feeling of anxiety that I'd end up being late to everything, which would trigger even more anxiety. I remember showing up late to a meeting at work. I'd been up all night, obsessing over my presentation, and I overslept. I barged into the boardroom with coffee stains all over my shirt, sweating profusely and smelling like poop. The owner was in the middle of speaking, and everyone stopped and just stared at me. Nobody said anything. They just waited for me to take a seat. I made my presentation, but I couldn't tell you how I did. My head was somewhere else. It affected my relationships too. My girlfriend was really understanding, but I could tell that she was getting really frustrated. I remember this one time we were grocery shopping. I was in a total daze, meaning she was pretty much doing all the shopping. She only asked me to get one thing. I think it was some apples. Well, I was so up in my head worried she was going to dump me that the apple chore became impossible. Weirdly enough, I was the one who broke things off with her, and that left me feeling very isolated and alone. She was the only person I talked to about my feelings. My family always projected a positive outward appearance. We never talked about the problems in our lives. I can remember my mom innocently asking me about my life, my love life, my job, when I was going to move in with my girlfriend. I hadn't told her we broke up. It was too much, and I just drifted away. But eventually I started to talk to my family about my feelings. It was really hard at first. I was ashamed. I felt weak, like I was a disappointment. But of course my mom was totally understanding. people about what I was going through helped, made me feel more grounded, even when my head was hurtling through space.
So that's the video, and thank you.
I've been suffering from depression for years. A few years.
So the basic idea was we wanted to start with comedians, in part because we know that comedians, on average, tend to experience or suffer from depression, and it's sort of known that to some degree their art and their craft is influenced by those experiences that they're having. So we're working with two artists right now, one Brian with Drift and Aaron for another piece that'll be launching relatively quickly after. And then the other thing that we wanted to do as well was explore the possibility of creating a quick-to-play casual game for mobile that would also explore the same story. So Lelaine will just sort of take you through the first little bit of the game. But the basic idea is that it's browser-based. It is optimized for mobile, so it's something that you don't need to download. So it would be a game that people would be able to play almost immediately if it's something that they're interested in. And the intention was to just sort of capture that story that was told to us and then have some type of light mechanic that would allow people to sort of play through that story and maybe to some degree experience the type of challenge that the person who was telling the story was experiencing, at least maybe to put people in a place where they would be able to empathize with that story. And so that's the intent, and this is kind of a quick snapshot of the project. This is in its sort of the prototype phase. We're creating two essentially prototypes, a video married to a light, quick-to-play game. And we're at the stage right now where we're going to be releasing it, launching it tomorrow. Probably most of the people that'll be viewing it will be people like yourself, people within the mental health community. So we do have on the website, on the project pages for both the artists, a feedback form. So we are looking and actively seeking out people's feedback on the project, what we can do when we go into production to make the project stronger, and maybe also getting feedback about what is working. So that's the project. And just, I don't know if we have time, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Yeah. What did you do in the game? I'm sorry? What did you do in the game part of it? Yeah, so in this game, it's hard to see on the browser, but it's a swiping mechanic. So you're the wind, and you're blowing his head to avoid the sort of the objects that, and all the objects are representations of things that for the comedian were stressors or triggers for him. So we sort of took those objects and placed it in the game. Yes, yeah.
Do you have, I didn't notice it at the start, do you have any kind of content warnings for these? I mean, obviously mental health, but...
Yeah, you know what? None. You'd recommend that?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, sounds good, yeah. Yes, yeah.
Does this have a traditional, like, happy ending, or it's just the point is to, like, live through the story?
You know what, in consulting with the artists, I think they felt that a happy ending wouldn't do their stories justice. But I think the happy ending, if there was one, was like in particular for Erin's story, was that her boyfriend sort of came out. It's called The Party, so it's an episode that occurred within a party. And so for her, her sort of happy ending was when the symptoms that she was experiencing remained, but it was the fact that there was a person in her life who could see what she was seeing, and that made a big difference for her. But she didn't want us to sort of suggest that there was sort of an easy solution or a cure or something like that. Yeah?
Are the stories based on real people?
They're based on real people, yeah. So Brian's story, so we actually had an interesting, so Aaron through the entire process has been sort of very actively involved. With Brian's story, it's actually based on another artist's, who's not by the name of Brian, story. But he ended up having to remove himself from the project as a result of his depression and the things that he was going on in his life, which is, I think, I think is something that we were anticipating with a project of this nature. But he did want us to go ahead and continue to at least release the project. Yeah.
I was wondering, like, did you have any like focus tests or anything just to see like how people react?
Well, no, and actually mainly because this is it. I mean, we've done isolated tests throughout the process, but the intention was to put it out into the world, and more specifically, we're going to be reaching out to people within the sort of mental health community.
You and I spoke when we first were introduced about the impetus behind why you started this game
Mm-hmm.
and the experience you had with making a different game and the challenges there. Could you speak a little bit about
Sure,
that?
yeah.
I think that's really
Yeah. So we were creating a game. It had nothing to do with this. It was a strategy game that featured a character who was who struggled with PTSD, and we did reach out to the mental health community, and we had advisors. And this was very early on in the process, so way before we were even at like a prototype. But we did recognize that we should be in consult with people. Professionals in the industry, just to make sure we're going in the right direction and if this is even appropriate for us to do. But the feedback that we received very early on was, PTSD is very difficult to represent within games or maybe in any in any kind of format. And so they sort of advised us that not to turn us away, but made it clear that maybe we should approach subject matter that is maybe a little more lower hanging fruit. And so that's what ended up sort of becoming the impetus for this project, which was a process in which we started to consult with people who were experiencing symptoms of from depression, anxiety, that sort of thing, and then one thing led to another, and this project was born. Yeah.
I haven't been able to see like the end of what you're showing here, but is the head always trying to rejoin with the body, or is the body at the bottom and the head's floating up?
Yeah, so the head is always trying to return back to the body, and so in the story that Brian shared with us was that he really, when his symptoms of anxiety and sort of depression set in, was that he felt as though he was somewhere else from the immediate environment that he was in. He felt dislocated from that environment, and he actually used the analogy of, I felt like my head was like floating above the situation that I was in. And we had maybe 10 or 15 stories to choose from, and then we narrowed it down. And we chose this story just because of that particular metaphor, and he also seemed to respond very positively to it, so that was the impetus for that. And also just to be just to remind you, we are this is very early stages. The game is by no means complete. It is intended as a prototype to sort of allow for people to sort of see that idea of this real world story being told, and then this ability to be able to interact with it directly, this sort of metaphor of the story. And maybe it's a terrible idea, or maybe it needs to be shifted a little bit. So we really are looking for feedback on, is this something that as we continue on collecting more stories, should we be pursuing this, or should we be maybe shifting it in a different direction? So any other one last question maybe? I'm sorry?
Can we play it
I think that was maybe the plan. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's downloadable now?
Yeah, so it isn't downloadable. It's browser based, and so right now, if you went to Widddle.ca, right now it's really optimized for an Android phone. So if you clicked on the game button, it would open up on your phone, and you'd be able to play it. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.